Hello and welcome to the April Current Conversations podcast. I'm Clinton Shepard, your host today with Gloucester's Community Engagement and Public Information Department. This month, we're going to be learning all about the county budget as we're in the middle of budget season. And we're joined by our County Administrator, Carol Steele, and our Chief Financial Officer, Maria Calloway. Welcome you both to the podcast today.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you.
Good morning. We'll just start out with Carol, if you don't mind kind of giving us just a brief introduction of yourself and how long you've been as our county administrator and how long you've been with Gloucester County.
I have been with Gloucester County for 38 years, and I had a long tenure as the Director of Parks, Recreation, and Tourism before moving over into administration. And then I worked my way up from Assistant County Administrator, and I have served as the County Administrator just shy of 3 years, and I was the interim one before that.
Thank you very much. And how about you, Maria? You've been our Chief Financial Officer now for how long?
Yep. So I've been the Chief Financial Officer for 2 years. As of May will be my 2-year anniversary for that position. But I have also been, I originally was hired actually back in 2014 as the accounting manager. I did I left and went somewhere else for a brief time, came back, and I also worked in the treasurer's office when I first came back as the chief deputy treasurer. And then, and that was in 2018, and then moved back up to finance in, 2020 or so around there. So I've been back in the finance office for the last 5 years.
Okay, great. And so starting March through April especially, we're in the prime time for budget. A lot of people wonder how all of it gets started. So maybe, Carol, if you don't mind kind of telling us, where do you even start with formulating a county budget?
Well, I would say budgeting overall, whatever year it is a circular process. We definitely use the historical information. So we would look at the previous year and not only that year, but the last couple of years. And sometimes when we're not sure of what an expense is going to be or what a revenue is going to be, we will take an average over the last several years as one of our best guides. But I think it's important for the public to realize we don't just think about budgeting once a year, and that it's also a grassroots type effort. So the department heads who may be turning around and asking their program managers or supervisors to submit information, but they're working on their budget throughout the year too, because you want to stay in budget. You don't want to overspend. You want to make sure you're on target and let people know if something's going very different than expected, either on the plus or the minus side. And then in the fall, the directors are asked to submit, and Maria can give more about the timeline on that, but the capital improvement budgets and then the operating budgets. And then we have a budget team that works together, pulling all the information together, and we rely heavily on the finance department to get and also HR department to get the requests for new positions and all of the budget requests into the document that we can then go through, discuss, meet with the department heads. And then it gets down to a crunch time where it's generally the CFO and the county administrator who are working on what do we present, and how does that final budget presentation look. And then one of my favorite expressions is May will come, because once we release that budget in now the middle of March, it used to be the 1st of March, but at least the operating and total budget, including the capital, in the middle of March, all those public input periods are happening and board discussions, and then they adopt in general in the month of April, and then that provides us that guidance of where to go. But it is absolutely a circle, and we are always working on the budget.
I can imagine. And Maria, did you have anything to add on that?
My perspective in finance, and I have one position in our office that is fully devoted to the budget. we really focus during the budget process of making sure that we are helping guide our department heads as needed, because our budgets really start with projecting revenues and making sure those revenues are realistic, I think, is the most important piece. And then guiding our department heads in providing their needs for the upcoming year. And so that may look like, Carol mentioned, may look like averages from the last several years, or it may look like, let's map out your next year and really understand what needs you're going to have at what times so that we can accurately budget that upcoming year. So, and then it's kind of the compilation of putting all those requests together with those revenues and seeing where do we match or where's the mismatch of revenues and expenses. And I think that's where it comes down to, just crunching the numbers between our office and administration.
Since we've been doing this for a while, in different levels too, but I just think it would be wonderful if one year when we got everything together on page that we had more revenues than expenditure requests, because that never, ever happens. So you're always looking at cutting, and I can't imagine where somebody would ever have the opportunity to be looking at how much money they were bringing in and realizing it was more than they needed. I guess that's just that way. Most of the places would not ever have that luxury.
I can imagine. And so kind of along those lines, obviously, every year we face challenges, and you all face challenges when developing a budget. But I would imagine each year shares its own specific challenges. So, Carol, I was wondering if you would mind kind of just giving us an overview on, as you were formulating your proposed budget for FY26, what were a couple of the major challenges that you faced when trying to come up with the budget?
I do think every year has to be looked at for what's happening outside of Gloucester as well as what's happening within the county. For example, this year is not an assessment year, but next year will. That shapes how your budget starts too. The looking outside, the external is what's going on at the General Assembly, and knowing that they are a major contributor to the comp board positions, which are the positions, the employee positions that are compensated by the state, which includes the elected official offices like the sheriff or the treasurer. There's 5 of them. I don't need to name them all, but all the elected officials' offices, as well as the education component. That's the huge part that they put. So we are looking as what's coming down from them financially, and then also laws that may be proposed that could change how we have to do our budgeting. And that's not as common, but it can impact what we do. So we rely heavily on our state associations to monitor, and as a collective group of local governments, we do some lobbying to the General Assembly to make sure that they understand the fiscal as well as other impacts of the things that they're proposing. So this year in particular, VACO, our organization that was lobbying for us, they were able to get a dent in with the General Assembly to make some changes on the allocations of education funds that would be relieving the local government from having to put too much money in because the state wasn't doing their share. And there's been a big, long study. It's going to be continuing for years to come. It was not fully resolved this year. And then the governor's proposed a revised budget does not match with the General Assembly. So we're still in that holding pattern to see what state budget actually gets assigned.
And Maria, on your end, when you get this general overview from Carol and from the state input, it's time for you to crunch numbers, and you're very good at that. A lot of people, including myself, I think, envy those of you who can look at a Excel spreadsheet and immediately begin to make sense out of all the numbers on it. So, but tell us as you kind of some of the challenges you face when working with the numbers and trying to make everything work out the way it's supposed to be.
Think number one is making sure that we incorporate everything that's needed. And so if we're, I look at a budget in two separate, as revenues and expenditures, and we look at those completely independently initially. It's not till the end that we're really starting to try to figure out how in the world we can align those two. But with expenditures, I think it's making sure that department heads understand what types of requests they really need. So making sure everybody is well trained and educated on what our fiscal year is and what upcoming things they may have in the next year. Are you going to have a big event? Is a building going to be transferring to the county, and that's going to increase your utility and electricity costs? Or so there's all kinds of factors that go in on that more micro level, where Carol really is looking at that macro level. She gets on the micro level too, but but initially in that macro level to make sure that she's keeping me abreast of any sort of legislative things that may impact the county. I'm working with our budget team on that real micro level of, okay, you have these part-time people. How many hours are they going to work? Because personnel is a huge part of our budget. So that always is a huge challenge, is just making sure that department heads are comfortable in providing us their requests for the next fiscal year. Revenue wise, I think we also have a lot of challenges just in the fact that we've gone through some pretty unprecedented times, and those big outside events that have happened, like COVID, which I hate to bring back up, but they really had some unexpected financial benefits to, that's probably not the right word, but we saw revenue growth, which was crazy. Just revenues going up and up and up with certain things like meals and sales tax, which we've talked about in almost every one of my presentations. So I think but now we're starting to see that kind of normalizing again. And I've said this before, that I think it's a lot like almost like watching the stock market, where it's only going to go up, 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 up for so long, and then it's going to kind of correct itself and balance itself out. And so I think it's just that predicting of where are those things happening and making sure that we're incorporating all of those external factors while we're watching our revenues on sometimes a daily basis. One of the big functions of our budget analyst is she watches the revenues come in almost every day, and she's providing updates to, hey, this maybe didn't come in the amount that we thought it was going to. Do we need to realign our budget? And we're doing that up until budget adoption to make sure that we're balancing those revenues.
I wanted to throw in another comment, just thinking about what was kind of specific about this year. And that's looking at the potential for 3 different forms of borrowing. And so that's another thing that Maria and I team up, and we work with our financial advisors at Davenport. And there's been a lot of discussion about that, but that's like a whole different part of the budget that we need to be prepared on, and what does it mean, and the impact. And then if approved, then a whole nother set of tasks is created. But we're looking at using sales tax proceeds for schools, heating and air conditioning needs, and potentially borrowing also for utilities and for the fire department. And there are kind of 3 different ways of doing things. So that's been an extra task for us this year.
And I think it's important too for the public to understand that you all try to find innovative ways to fund these various different projects.
Absolutely. And one of the biggest ways that we do that, and that starts at the department head level, is the grant writing.
Yes.
And it's a concern that we may not have the resources in the future that we have had. And Gloucester in particular, because of the size of our locality and a number of different geographic factors and all, we have not benefited as much as others have. So losing those resources like inner city areas that have gotten a lot of federal funding, we're not in that boat at all. But it was disappointing that during the infrastructure funds that and during the broadband grants and other things that, I mean, we fight hard, but if we don't qualify, we don't qualify. And
Exactly.
now those resources may be drying up, which makes it even a little bit more difficult.
For sure. But, and then the other point as we kind of start to wrap up here, it's not just you all and the Board of Supervisors involved in this budget process. We do want citizen involvement. And so can you tell us a little bit about how citizens can get involved in the budget process?
I think there's multitudes of ways, and we will have people sort of pop in and out when they hear something that maybe is very personal to them.
Mm-hmm.
And other than that, the majority of the public do not pay attention to the budget process, unfortunately. And I understand why. And if I was maybe in their shoes and, you've got a full life that you're dealing with your own finances, your own family, and then to have to maybe write a letter or make a phone call or attend a meeting, it's just kind of a hassle. And then I think some people have an attitude of it won't do any good anyway.
Right.
To speak up. But I know it does make a difference. I've seen things change. I've seen the board change direction from things that the county administrator has recommended, not only from my seat of being county administrator, but previous bosses that I've had. And a lot of that is based on what they're hearing from the public. And we do see some of the same people frequently. And that is not just the case for Gloucester. That's everywhere you go. We have like the joke about the same 10 people, and in some localities it might be the same 5 people that attend faithfully, and good for them. But we really, really want the full public to reach out. And even if you don't know what the budget includes or doesn't include, you can still say what's important to you in an email to all the board or come up and speak. There is no requirement to understand it completely. I think, we're there to help educate whenever we can. So if somebody has a question of why are the taxes going up, or why is this or that, we want to talk with them. But I would just urge everyone to let their board members know, as well as the full board, not just their representatives, but the full board, of what they have of their vision and their desires for the county.
For the public to know, we've got all the information regarding the proposed budget on the county's homepage or the website at gloucesterva.gov. There's a schedule of budget work sessions. We've got a public hearings where public input can be taken April 14th. That meeting will begin at 6 p.m. At the T.C. Walker Education Center. So that's another opportunity, a formal opportunity for the public to come out and make their voice heard on the proposed budget. I want to thank both of you. I know your schedules are extremely busy, especially this time of year. So I appreciate you taking the time to educate us a little bit on how all of this comes to be.
Well, I thank you for the opportunity to talk about the budget. It is one of my favorite subjects. Believe it or not, it is. So thank you. And I also, this is not it may say county administrator's recommended budget, but it is definitely a team effort with the budget committee. But I could not do this without Maria and her whole finance department.